Hi everybody. I've just been looking at the news and it looks like a lot of companies are entering foreclosure here in Australia. We've got major home builders who are going into bankruptcy. We also have truck companies. Now Australia is built on trucking. A lot of our goods and services are transported by trucks. And the same goes in a lot of other countries. Now, with the rising fuel prices, we can obviously see that a lot of them are facing trouble. So bankruptcies are on the verge in the trucking industry. Now, the consequences of this are going to be a classic hollowing out process of the economy as 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 home builders and construction companies fall due to increased cost of just about everything, which is a lot of it is to do with inflation for one, printing of money. Two, it's the increased cost of fuel and those other types of commodities like lumber, which use fuel. It's all just a big a downward cycle of costs. Now, these increased costs are going to feed on themselves. So once one company goes out of business, that's going to be a lot of jobs taken off the table. So those jobs that are taken off the table will mean that those people who are working there have less money to spend. And when they have that less money to spend, they're not going to be giving money to other companies in the economy. So that's going to mean more companies are losing income because of those job losses. It just doesn't just affect the one company. And the problem is that incomes and revenue is not rising fast enough to meet this hollowing out process of the economy. So we're going to have possibly trucking companies here in Australia going out of business, which is going to cause major problems for retailers who don't have goods to sell. And once people see the economy falling and people losing jobs, people are going to be less inclined to spend money, which is going to be an even bigger problem for the economy. Now we have people hoarding their money, not spending money, economic activity is going to plummet, and the way I see it, we are definitely on the brink of a depression. A recession lasts a few months, a depression lasts a few years. And I think the excessive money printing that happened during 2008 and more recently 2020 and 2021 to combat COVID and the global financial crisis, this money printing, you print it, it just doesn't go away. The burden of that money printing has to be paid over years. So policymakers will need to balance the burden of the money printing, and that's all catching up with us now as the hollowing out process of the economy takes place. Travel is going to suffer, tourism is going to suffer as fuel prices rise, as interest rates rise. People are going to have more expenses. People are going to become more financially conscious. There's even an article here in Australia that student loans are going to go through the roof. Now, Australia has a lot of student loan. Sorry, just my hand there. I haven't got my phone stand delivered yet, so I'm still having to hold my camera. So anyway, student loans are going to student HEX loans here in Australia, we'll call it. It's gonna go through the roof, along with interest rates for homes, for bank cards. So the spending on the economy is going to go down, and the government policy to combat this is going to be limited because the government now has a very large debt. We were approaching we were approaching a budget surplus, but now in a substantial budget deficit, and that is going to be another big problem for us because what the government is limited by the amount of debt that it has to pay to foreigners. So the stimulus that it can afford is quickly running out. The stimulus that the government gave here in Australia is running out. The government needs money, so raising interest rates is gonna possibly provide some of those funds. But anyway, the global printing that America did, it's gonna because it's a global reserve currency. The printing that they did is spread over the world because a lot of countries that don't have anything to do with the financial American system, are doing contracts done in US dollars. So as America prints more of those US dollars, raises inflation, and combine that with the commodity and fuel shortage, it's going to significantly, as we've seen in Sri Lanka and now coming into Pakistan, it's going to significantly increase the chance of those countries failing because they can't print more of their money to tackle their problems. All their loans and their payments are done in foreign currency. So if the US dollar is devalued and the price of everything goes up, that's clearly giving the global economy problems. So the way this it's going to play out is we're going to see a lot of companies going into liquidation, and that's going to take years and years to see the full impact of this. For the last 2 years, we've been relatively sheltered by low interest rates and high money printing, which has just kick-started the economy. But now the cost of that is going to have to be paid. It was too much too quick, and I don't think we fully recovered from the 2008 policies and money printing that was put into place to combat that housing bubble. So it's going to be a global recession. Keep an eye out. Commodity prices are going to stay high. The first thing that's going to suffer is stock prices. The wealth is going to be drawn down, and unfortunately, we're going to have a lot of suffering. The only way we can really combat that at the moment is to cut unwanted expenses, unneeded expenses. Focus on personally focus on only spending money on what we need to. But still, even this, it's a form of austerity that's going to contract the economy, and it's very hard to combat, and policymakers are going to have a very hard time in this environment. So that's what's going to be happening by the looks of things. To combat the commodity price rise is, in my opinion, is very difficult because of the global economy. To combat this, every country would have to work together. But unfortunately, we have political upheaval between the West and the East, between Middle Eastern countries, China and Russia. So they're all at odds with each other. With all the sanctions in the world, they can't see eye to eye. So this is just going to be one thing on top of the other. And classically, the political and the financial circumstances of countries globally between each other is a precursor to major world conflicts, like we saw in the world theatre in 1930, when the US imposed tariffs on global trade. It was essentially the beginning of an economic war globally between Japan, Germany, and the US. So we have those conditions now, and once things get bad, once our food supplies are threatened, because all these global food manufacturers are only focused on profit. They're not a charity. So if their costs of producing certain goods, or running their machinery to do farming, is through the roof and they can't afford to do it anymore, it's not profitable, they may stop producing food. Like we saw India stop exporting grain. So the times are going to be tough. And once people are in hard economic conditions, it becomes more likely that right wing totalitarian top-down command structures are set up in countries, which is another precursor to war, which is what happened in Japan, and it's what Hitler did in Germany, following Germany's recession and tough economic times with its reparation payments to the Western nations after World War One. So it's going to be very difficult, and I think the only way that we can really combat this is on an individual level, is to watch our finances and just be good to one another. Whether people are Russian, whether they're white, black, whatever, we just need to treat each other well. And that's the only way we can come through. I think that's the only way we can come through and overcome these tough circumstances. So, yeah, that's how I see the things that are to come. The consistent company foreclosures and bankruptcies recently, and an indication of a global depression. So keep watch, take care, and all the best. See you in the next one.